going to talk about the social event later, so.
Du, ich bin im Song, das macht die Phase auf der Ende oder aufhören. Tut mir jetzt leid.
I tried to finish at 7, so we can eat off as many students. Ah, that's nice. People are waiting for me. New experience. So, part 1 was current situation. I mentioned some problems. Most of you know those problems. So, what can we do as options? Both in Python and now for something completely different. I call this whole idea Voyager. I had this name in mind for some time simply because it fits into the Star Trek stuff and it actually makes sense. It's like a voyage we would have to do. IBM, about 10 years ago, dumped OS2 for PowerPC, I guess. Apple actually made quite a similar move. They moved from macOS 9 to macOS 10. If you compare those two systems, you will notice that the break between those systems is really incredibly big. If you read the Darwin documentation, I have that here on paper, you will notice that Apple faced a lot of the problems we face. They didn't have a multi-user system. They had a user interface which was nice, but not really modern. We don't even want to talk about their memory management and so on. They had a lot of good concepts, but a lot of bad code in the back end. So they did the switch from macOS 9 to 10, which was in fact a complete new implementation of an operating system. The only thing they did is that they provided some kind of classic environment for the old applications. They call this classic and they encourage the developers to migrate into the new, much more recent, up-to-date toolkit. So one of those concepts with a change worked, the other one failed, the one of IBM. But the ideas were good in both concepts. Let's have a look at that. If we have a look at an operating system, we notice that this is really a quite complex thing. For me, I split an operating system in more or less 3 parts, for sure. We can talk about that, but one part is the user interface, one part is the kernel itself, and one part is the device drivers. At the moment we fight on OS2 mainly with this one here, and we reach the limits of that one here. And we know that we have no way to do anything in here. So, let's have a look at those parts. In my opinion, the PM and GPI API has to be replaced. They are A, too complicated for developers nowadays, and B, they are closed source, period. We cannot rely on that, we cannot port that on another platform at the current stage. The system object model, the backend of the workplace shell, is actually some kind of Corva implementation, an older one actually, and it's not that a big miracle. It's really something we could rewrite. So we could think about replacing that part here by our own some implementation. And then, if we have that as base, we could start to implement or to rewrite the WPS on top of our new toolkit, on top of our new backend. The graphics programming interface, this was really my #1 headache for a long time. At the developers workshop, I just talked about the kernel, because I really had no clue what we could do regarding the user interface. In the past months, I discovered a nice library. It's called Cairo, and we have it in OS2. Cairo, in fact, is a vector-based engine. If you want details, Doodle can probably tell more about it. Cairo is quite powerful. Cairo is not yet at the end of its life because it just started, and Cairo gets used more and more. Cairo is actually used by Mozilla. That's the reason why we had to port it to OS2. It will be used in OpenOffice in the future. There are already screenshots in the OpenOffice wiki. And the GTK Plus toolkit started to move all drawing into Cairo. So Cairo is really a project that will get a lot of attention in the future. There is another option. It's actually the rendering engine of Qt4. It's called Arthur. It's built into the toolkit. Maybe just a few words about this backend. We have to have something as powerful as GPI. That's the reason why I was thinking about that. The problem was that so far I just knew Cairo on X, and I didn't know that this is possible to use Cairo on anything else than X. I personally don't like X, and I said whatever I'm going to do, I will not make something that relies on X. X is even older than PM, and in my opinion it's really stupid to replace something old with something even older. So that's the reason why I was not really motivated to rewrite the WPS on something like X. But the cool thing is, and that I discovered a few weeks ago, and that really changed my mind, Cairo can have any backend. Doodle ported it to GPI or PM or both? GPI. It would be possible to build Cairo on top of Snap directly. It is possible to run Cairo on Blitz. Blitz is a backend that runs on top directly of OpenGL. What's the benefit of that? You get a damn fast toolkit because OpenGL, with the help of Blitz, can implement stuff in hardware. So even if you would start working on it on OS2 right now, we would have an option for the future. If OpenGL drivers get common, either on OS2 or on Linux or whatever, we could migrate the backend directly on OpenGL, and this is really tempting. Another option for sure would be to implement something completely separated on top of OpenGL. That's the PM or GPI on GL idea again. In my opinion, this simply doesn't make sense. We should really focus on existing stuff and concentrate on stuff we like. A little bit more about Cairo. It's a modern, open source, cross-platform 2D API. It's really well supported at the moment, and it will get much more attention, I bet on that. It's a PDF PS-like 2D API. If you compare that again to the concept of macOS 10, the Quartz engine, the rendering engine of macOS 10, is exactly something like that. Solaris did something like that years ago already with CDE. That was done on top of PS. macOS took it to PDF and Cairo. They always write PDF PS. I don't really know to what it resembles more. Do you know that? It's at least like that. The cool thing is we have multiple output system. That's a really benefit of GPI as well. You know, it's really easy, or at least more or less easy, to print something from presentation space. It would be possible to have a screen output. It's also possible to have a print-in output. That makes life easier for the developer. Same game as on macOS 10 again. We have an OS2 port already, so we could start playing with that thing. It's not accelerated so far, but it's a start. It's a cool thing. And again, we have the OpenGL-based backend called Blitz. I will show some links where you can find more information about that as well. And again, macOS 10 has an OpenGL Quartz backend, so macOS 10 Quartz is directly on OpenGL. That's the reason why they can do all those fancy things in acceptable speed. I'm sure some of you already saw this whoops stuff. Really nice, eye-catching stuff. The next thing we will need if we have a backend is the toolkit. I told that PM is no longer really up to date, and I don't really see a sense in rewriting the whole PM. We wouldn't attract any new developers like this. People don't want to write on that level anymore, at least most of them. So we have an option between using an existing toolkit or write our own toolkit, like an open source. What's the macOS 10 toolkit called again? Forgot the name. An existing toolkit which is really powerful is GTK, another one is Qt. We've seen a Qt presentation by Dimitri today. It's really a nice toolkit. It's really much easier to write an application like this than with PM. If we compare the two things, GTK is used a lot on open source systems, Linux, BSD, whatever. For example, we have the SWT widget on top of GTK on Linux systems. SWT, for those who don't know it, this is the stuff used by the Eclipse framework of IBM. It's also used by Atsurois, the coolest file sharing client for torrent. We would get that basically for free if we build on top of GTK. Another thing, wx widgets, that's also a toolkit which is quite well known. The implementation of Linux is also done on top of GTK, so we get that for free as well. And an important thing for us as well, both Firefox and Thunderbird are using GTK, so we wouldn't have to worry about those ports as well. And think about that once, we would get stuff for free without investing time. That gives us a lot of spare time focusing on the real cool things like WPS integration and stuff like this. That is really tempting. Another thing is GTK Plus is written in C. It's really easy to add wrappers to other languages. Qt doesn't like C, but for toolkits. But I think that's really tempting to use. Just as an example, I mentioned the Dr. Dialog stuff. It would be cool to have GTK bindings for Rec6, so we could write to user interfaces in Rec6 using GTK as backend. Qt is another option. I'm not really a fan of building something off top of Qt for various reasons. One of them is in C++ only. But one thing is for sure, we should provide Qt support as well. Whatever we're going to do with GTK and Qt, you get about 95% of all interesting applications out there. And one thing is for sure, we don't need yet another toolkit. The world doesn't need that. Waste of time. Another thing I really liked is, I mentioned that again, the MMPM stuff, abstracting file formats and toolkits. We should do that as well. If we do that, we should really try to make sure that we can easier implement stuff like FFmpeg. Things that exist. It's a lot of work to implement such codecs, and I rather prefer something where I can simply compile it with FFmpeg and I get all the FFmpeg libraries abstracted to my system. Whenever possible, let's do stuff like this. Let's save time with stuff we don't want to invest time into. I'm not sure if there is enough interest to do that, but I'm really tempted to do that because it's one of the unique things of OS2. We should at least give it a try if we find developers motivated to do that. Then, if we think we have a toolkit now, we need some kind of kernel. Whatever we're going to do, we have to make sure that we do not rely on a specific kernel. We did that the past 10 years now, and we know where it leads, in a lot of frustrations. So whatever we do, the stuff to the kernel needs to be abstracted via an interface that can easily be ported on another kernel. Then we can think about the kernel options we have. I mentioned them already. Any of the BSD kernels, a Linux kernel, a Darwin kernel, L4 microkernel, there's L4 Linux stuff as well, K42. The BOS kernel, I think that should be some kind of microkernel as well, or the Reactos kernel. Whatever we do, it absolutely doesn't matter from the user point of view. And I do have my favorites in here, but it's a question I cannot and don't want to answer right now. And it's pretty useless to debate about that right now. This is something the developers should do, and if we realize that we are enough people to maintain a complete distribution, think of that, and I'm not speaking for Menzies here, think of that as Ecom Station 3, a bundle with a kernel, with our user interface, with applications. If we manage to do something like this, I reach my goal. And the kernel is really not the thing that worries me most about it. We should take an existing one and we should try to invest as few time as absolutely necessary into the kernel. There's more interesting work than that.
What about the QNX? The Amiga folks are using that.
To be honest, whatever kernel we're going to take, I'm not going to support any project where we are in the same situation with device drivers as we are now. Because of this, Linux might be the tempting one. I don't like it by design. But whatever we're going to do, I will not write device drivers in the future. I will not support projects who invest a shitload of time into writing device drivers. So this question is really open, but I know that we don't have the power to write device drivers, at least not many. As I said, keep the focus on the kernel. This question is really a religious question. If you ask 10 people, you will probably get 10 different answers. And after all, we don't work with the kernel. We work with the stuff on top of it. We have to search for a kernel which provides a similar multitasking like OS2. I agree on that. And I would love to have a binary device driver interface. If we have that in the future, I'm really a happy man. If I see that it leads nowhere to go for Darwin, for example, I will live with Linux. That's simply a question we can't answer right now, and we shouldn't focus on that too much at the moment, in my opinion. Device drivers, there are still some things I would like to talk about. There are some really cool concepts on OS2. They appeared the past years. I have 4 different things here. Every one of you knows that probably, or most of them at least. We have Daniela's driver. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it this time. I mean, do we have to worry about ID device drivers anymore? We simply install Daniela driver and I think 99% of the stuff is covered by that. This is really a cool thing. The drivers are fast, they are reliable, they are cool. If we can keep such stuff on a new kernel, I would really appreciate that. It's sad that she's not here. I would have liked to talk to her how much work, for example, she would have to invest to get something like that to work on a Darwin or whatever kernel. Not now, I would like to finish. UniOld, same game. I know that UniOld is not really stable for various reasons. I will try to address that. But the fact that I simply get one driver which supports a lot of different chipsets without me choosing it is really cool. And I would like to keep that also for some card drivers. Exactly the same game for Skytech Snap. Do we have to worry about display drivers anymore? No. As long as we don't need OpenGL, we don't have to do that. This is really tempting. This is really something we need in the future as well. By the way, I talked to the Skytech guys as well. As some of you might know, quite a lot of Snap is released as GPL, so it would be possible to port that on a new kernel if we help them doing that. That would be possible. The new thing which appeared really the past days is GenMac, generic wrapper for Win32 network interface device drivers. That's also a cool concept. That was mentioned at the K42 presentation this morning. Build an interface for Win32 drivers, at least to support some of them. Then you can use binary device drivers from Windows. Whatever we're going to do, I think those concepts are really tempting, and I didn't see any operating system which did it that well as OS2. We had to go that way because we didn't have any other option. But I don't know of any other system which has that much support. For sure, the GenMac idea was actually done on Linux first, but we were first with Snap, UniOld, and the SATA stuff. So that's a cool thing. We should think about how we can keep that going on. For sure, and I'm pretty sure Knut told me that as well. He said, when you go to write a new toolkit, I'm probably not the guy who will contribute a lot to the upper part, to the user interface part. But if you have some hardcore stuff to implement on low levels, we can talk about it. And I'm pretty sure that people like Daniela, like Willibald Meyer, they are more interested in that concept. So I'm sure we can find an interesting part for them as well in a new concept like this. Even more work. As I said, vital localized versions for any country, for any language, as long as there is enough people speaking it, or there are enough people speaking it. This is really important. Like this, you can attract new people. If we continue to do that like the way eComStation does it, I mean, there's already a lot of know-how in eComStation, because a lot of stuff got translated already. If we can continue with that, we have a really good base for a nice niche system, which can attract new people. Again, Unicode and UTF-8, this is really the way to go. Everything else is plain stupid. Every single application should implement that right from the beginning. Then we don't have to worry about code pages anymore. People can use it all over the world, new people get attracted, and so on. Also on file system level, and so on. macOS 10 does it as well, by the way. They know why. A thing which is maybe more important for the developers, or the people who want to contribute in any form, the documentation needs to be excellent. Why? If you ever try to write a Linux device driver, or if you ever try to contribute something to GNOME, you know how hard it is to get into that stuff. Apple does that really, really well. I will show you some links. Go and visit them. They document the stuff extremely well. Even if they overdo it with nice words a bit, the stuff is good documented. It makes it much easier for new people to get into that stuff. We should check the API documentation from Darwin, from Apple, and try to keep that level. Also, the user interface part of Apple is really well documented. You will find a sample code for about everything you can think of. This really helps the developers to contribute new things. We must provide that right from the beginning, otherwise we will not do it. I know how it works. I know that developers don't like to do such stuff, so we have to provide them a base to do that easily, like Doxygen, stuff like this, documentation directly in the source code, generation of the help files, and so on, out of this source code. The goal is absolutely clear. It must be easy for new people to get into this project, to contribute in any form. In the ideal world, you have to invest 2 hours to compile a sample application of whatever you want to do, and then you can continue to implement that stuff. This is not the case for most open source projects, I know, but it is possible to do. One thing that tries to cover that is the netlabs.org certification program. That's something Christian and I started to think about. He did a lot of thinking. We will hopefully have more time at the developer workshop next year to present that. We want to provide some guidelines people can read, and then they know, okay, as a developer, to get into the core team, for example, I try to follow that recommendations. And we try to certificate applications as well, projects as well, sorry, in a way that we can say, this project follows those guidelines, which actually means for the developer, for example, I can compile it myself within 10 minutes or something. That's a goal that should be reached. That makes life much easier for everyone. It's also less trouble if one developer leaves. You know how long it took until some people started to take care of X Workplace, for example.
Unbelievably long, yes.
It was absolutely not easy to get into that stuff. We have 2 or 3 people now who are able to compile it. But that simply has to be easy as Dimitri showed with Qt this morning. Simple script which asks some questions and the rest is built. Christian does it as well with XVLAN, if I remember correctly.
Yes, and with Voyager toolkit.
Voila, that's the way to go.
Look how Pixel was done in a weekend, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Pixel was also really fast ported, but the main time he had to invest is to get the development environment up and running. And this is also something that shouldn't be like this. This should work right out of eComStation. We work on that, by the way, with Menzies. For sure, we have to cover common user access guidelines. There needs to be a standard about how people can interact with the applications. That's stuff we like on OS2, that's stuff we miss on other platforms. Let's try to take that as a base. An interesting reading is this wiki link here. You have the presentation here on CD. Visit that link. It gives some insight about it, and it also writes that Apple actually used CUA as base for macOS 10. Didn't know that before. Another thing that's more for developers, consistent class and method names, see it all in kernel programming guide. If you have defined prefix, people will really like you. OS2 did it like this. That's also something people or developer liked about OS2. You have clear defined APIs, and that's what I personally miss on a lot of Unix projects. We have to provide all that stuff. So, I talked a lot about ideas. What is happening now? In fact, I started to think about those concepts 3 or 4 weeks ago. So there was really a lot of stuff done in this short time frame. The code name of this piece is Voyager. You will find a wiki page at NetLabs. I will show the link later. We have some prototypes already. I will show 2 little things later. We have parts of a sum replacement already. Chris Waldenwood started to do that before I had this idea already. And I think my idea now motivated him to push that further. He's really coding like crazy at the moment. He gave me some documentation already a sample screenshot. This will go on in the future. What I can say is that we will focus on GTK Toolkit. Sebastian Wittemeyer visited me at Systems, and I talked to him, and he was also really into this idea, and he tries to push Everblue further to get GTK 2 or plus, I never know what is correct, to work on OS2 now. There are 2 new screenshots in the Everblue section at NetLabs about GIMP getting somewhere on Everblue 2, right?
Yes.
So we have some really nice progress there as well, and I expect that we will have a GTK in the near future. I know that his spare time is also really precious, but we are really motivated to push that stuff further now. So we already have some kind of sum prototypes. We get somewhere near GTK 2 or plus, and we have a Cairo on top of PM. I talked to some friends at the university which are using Linux, and they were really tempted by the idea as well, as many other people, by the way. One reason to push that stuff. And this week he told me, I compiled Cairo with a Glitz backend on OpenGL on Linux. I don't need X except for the OpenGL driver. So basically he has now a Cairo on top of Glitz, on top of X, but just for this driver. What he will start to do now is to implement some kind of window manager on top of that. That's the thing which arranges all the windows on your desktop. In OS2, PM, and GPI do that stuff. In Linux, this is always done with a so-called window manager. So we need to provide something like that on top on Glitz, that we could replace the backend with Glitz in the future ones. That would be my ideal world. Another thing we try to do, I talked already on IRC with Doodle about that. We should try to provide a Glitz full screen backend on top of Snap as well in the near future. And any other backend which is tempting on OS2. Like this, we have really a big, several platforms where people can start contributing. This is really vital. I want that OS2 coders can code on OS2 on that, but I also want that people who just work on Linux can work on Linux or BSD on that. That's the reason why we try to support as many different platforms as possible already. One thing we should talk about a bit as well is PM compatibility. I know that this is a damn hard decision to say we do not provide any compatibility at all, because it will break all the stuff we know and like. There are 2 concepts I see at the moment. One concept is virtualization. One of the most promising projects, in my opinion, is Zen. This is an open source project which got really a lot of publicity the past month, simply for the fact because IBM, HP, Intel and AMD are starting to contribute to that thing. They try to make that some kind of virtualization standard. There are other solutions as well. So one way would simply be run your old ecom station stuff in a virtual machine. This is in German, der Weg des geringsten Widerstands, the path without a lot of resistance. The drawback is that it's not really a soft migration, it's quite a hard break. The other way is that we try to provide some PM compatibility. Most applications actually just need a small subset of PM APIs, so it would be possible to say, okay, we try to implement, for example, on top of Cairo or on the same level as GTK. I'm not really good enough in those concepts to say where. We try to provide some kind of API compatibility on that level to get those applications we want to work. In theory, it would even be possible to have binary compatibility, like we did it on OS2 with Odin. This is for sure just a matter of investing time. And I'm really not sure if it's a good idea to put a lot of time into that. Because I'm afraid it's less time to port those applications to a new user interface than migrating that. That's my personal opinion.
But don't a lot of people have commercially bought old packages that still work and want to continue using them?
Yes, but to be honest, I located 2 on my system. I'm sure people do have their favorite applications, and I don't want to answer that question right now because I know it's a really sensitive question. For me, it clearly depends. For example, I know that this is this free PM project. If you can talk to those people and motivate them to actually use Cairo as a GPI replacement, for example, and then build their stuff on top of Cairo, I will definitely support such projects as good as I can. I will also support projects who try to add some binary compatibility to that stuff. But I will always ask myself, how much time should we invest into that? What's the benefit we get? If you really think it's worth it, if developers really think they will invest time into that, I will support whatever comes out. I will really help you. I will provide subversion repositories, I will provide track interface and so on. But we should think about that before we lose a lot of time in that stuff. It's a question that is really the big unknown at the moment, but it's a question we have to ask. For sure, what we have to do is to integrate existing applications like OpenOffice, Mozilla, and so on into this new environment. As I said, if we have GTK as base, we get a lot of stuff for free, and we can really focus on implementing drag and drop for everything, for Mozilla, for example, or Firefox, or Thunderbird, or OpenOffice, and so on. We can provide classes for documents, the stuff we love and like on OS2, the templates, and so on. That stuff we want to rewrite. Actually, Chris told me I'm ready that we can start the rewrite of that stuff on top of GTK because we have a some prototype. We'll show that as I said. The next step is quite clear for me. I try to provide build environment on OS2. We have GTK for OS2 on the works. I talked about the build environment on Linux. I will focus on that at the same time because that's the only way to get new people into it. Maybe someone would like to contribute to build environment for macOS 10. Actually, I think that should be absolutely possible because we have OpenGL on macOS 10. Why not try to compile glitz on that? Then we would even have a Darwin kernel on top, underneath it. That's an interesting thing. If you have any other kernel you think would be a nice choice for something like that, let me know. I really want to have build environments on any platform that sounds attractive. We have a mailing list for discussions. You will find all necessary information, a lot of white papers, a lot of links, a lot of discussion on this page here. This page didn't exist, or almost didn't exist till 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's that big now. We really have to split it up. But we write some really interesting discussions, and I'm absolutely sure that this is a way to attract new people. I talked to so many people which are not using OS2, and I got so many positive feedbacks like, if you're going to do this project, I will join it, I will help you. This is really tempting. I know that it's a really hard decision for us, but if we don't do anything now, we will be really depressed in 2 years if we do a Warpstock again, or we won't do a Warpstock anymore, because there's no sense in doing anything anymore. And I don't want to get there. I would like to have a Warpstock with a lot of new people using this new platform in the future. Next steps from my side, in April 2006, actually 8th and 9th April, I will host the developer workshops at the University of Applied Science in Biel, in Switzerland. That's the place where I live. The benefit for me is that I almost have no work to get the university into it because I'm basket operated there, so I can organize quite a lot of things for free. I really hope that we can show some prototypes to developers at that stage. I really hope that we are ready with some basic build platforms at that stage. I really hope that we have some first progress on a GTK-based WPS at this stage. Simply something we can show to people. In best case, 1 year from now, and next Warpstock, wherever it will be, we'll have some prototypes to play with. Don't think of that as a short-term project. You will have to work on Ecom Station 1.2 or 2.0 for at least 2 years, I guess. This is Ecom Station 3, as I call it, again, without talking for Menzies or Serenti systems here. This is my vision of what could be done in 2 and more years. That's not something you code fast. When I learned something with NetLabs is that everything takes more time than people expect. But I really hope that we can provide some stuff there, and fresh meat is really welcome. If new developers are attracted by that idea, I would really be happy to see them there. So you are really welcome to join this project. I will quickly show you the stuff I talked about, which looks a bit like something. I know that the decision is really, really hard, and I have to tell you that I was really depressed the past months, or the past 1.5 years almost, because I simply had no option what we will do when IBM pulls the plug. And we know that IBM will stop after 2006. We also know that Ecom Station will exist beyond that point. We can still buy it. But we all together know that this will lead nowhere if we don't do something now. That's the reason why I proposed that idea. It's a really big cut into the theme. But I think we should try it. We should give it a try. We should push that idea further. And if we are successful, we will be really happy users in 2 years, which start to work on a really, really up-to-date, cool operating system, as we did mid-90s. And I tell you, no other project has a similar goal. All projects I know work on X, and they rely on old thinkings. And OS2 has this unique feature that they were way ahead of its time, and we try to push that to the next level now. We will probably have some discussions in this area here. We will for sure have discussions at the social event later. Tell me your feedback, tell me what you think about it. Contribute to the wiki, read the mailing list, but please do me a favor and don't start flame wars. I really want to have some realistic discussions in there. If you don't like that idea at all, ignore us. Do me that favor. I really want to focus on the people who are motivated to do something like that, and I want to talk to people who are constructive in feedback. I don't want to have stupid discussions if we can't get PM binary on something, whatever, I don't know. This is useless. We have to focus on the stuff we like, we have to re-implement it in a modern way, and that's my proposal about how to do it.
So the most important thing is to do the things that we can do and that we
exactly
know how we can do that right now.
We are damn good at that stuff.
Leave the open questions for later on.
Exactly. We are damn good at that stuff. We OS2 users have a different thinking about how to interact with the desktop. I talked to ex-OS2 users at Systems, and one guy came to me and he told me, man, I never had a better way to administrate a file server than on OS2. I really miss this. So that's what I told when I talked to Bart. We will go for Open LDAP for user management because it's an LDAP directory service. We will go for Samba for shares. And if we implement now the OS2 way, to administrate something like that on a new platform, we have a really cool thing. We could even administrate Linux and BSD servers like this, because it doesn't matter if the OpenLDAP server is installed locally on our machine or if it's a server farm for a mid-sized company. That absolutely won't matter because it's all through the network. So we have a really interesting concept here. We could take the stuff we like on the next level and use as much stuff as possible that exists. I really won't spend a minute on something that is done already in a good way. That's completely useless. Use Samba, use OpenLDAP, use OpenOffice, and so on. You name it, we use it as a base. And then we focus on the stuff we know, as you said.
And that we can do.
Exactly. One example, the wireless widget you did. I don't know any platform which does it that obvious and easy as this widget. For some reason, Linux people and Windows people, they simply think in a different way. And we think different, so we should try to focus on the stuff we know.
And that way we can influence things.
Exactly.
I mean, this is just a vision for the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, we are on a train running through a tunnel, and it is for me just that we want to see light in 2 or 3 years, and we have to do things for that now.
The cool thing is that we wouldn't have to break with the e-com station usage nowadays. We could go on, we could start to implement the stuff on top on that, and when the backend is ready to change, when we have OpenGL accelerated backend on whatever, then we can switch. And if this with OpenGL won't lead to somewhere, we can still use X as a backend. We have really something that will work in the future as well.
I would just like to mention, if somebody feels that he may lose or she may lose, let's say, an application or a way things go right now, like I set up my system with certain applications that I like and I use every day, we will see most of the programs that we can influence, the port like Mozilla, Firefox, something, we can influence that. There are other programs like what I did for Internet Assistant or what you, Peter Collar did for More Publisher. We have that in our hands. And there may be some applications where we don't have that in our hands. Let's say old software, legacy software that is commercial and is not supported any longer.
Classic would be PM Fact.
Yes, of course. But I think most of us will be happy to throw away these things in 2 years because the future to come is better than what we keep when we want to keep applications like this. I mean, then just let's better think that it's time in replacing these things that cannot be migrated to a new platform.
Yeah, but you see, for example, I need for professional reasons, I need an environment that allows me to emulate over half a dozen different operating systems. I got DB2, Sybase, Oracle. I have network monitoring and admin tools.
Yes, sure.
I do have about 24 different programming languages.
But you don't do that on a ROS 2 station, do you?
Well, yes.
Let's just look if we have a new way of doing things. Let's just look how we can do that.
But you see, I need these tools in order to earn a living, and the platform where I lose those tools would just not be of any interest.
Let's focus on that, and let me just finish that. We can have the discussion.
One thing. If we don't do this, you will be stuck in a dead-end road. Believe me.
Well, right now I'm still.
Yeah, right now. You're talking about right now. I'm talking about 2 years.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck. Believe me.
Well, if I don't have those tools available, then I would need to switch operating systems anyway.
That's what I say. That's the situation. We have to switch anyway if we don't do anything. And I prefer to work to somewhere where I know that I feel like at home. It won't be OS2 anymore.
But are you going to be able to get DB2 running on that platform or Oracle?
What DB2 do you run under EcoStation? It's outdated.
Well, it's DB2 version 7 Enterprise.
Yeah, it's outdated. What are you talking about? In 2 years, it's DB2 version 9.
Well,
you can't run it on those 2.
Well,
what are you talking about?
Let's please stop this discussion. I would like to show some things, and then we can finish the session and talk to each other. This is the Voyager page. this is actually the table of contents. It's a bit unorganized, we know that, we work on it. But it contains plenty of really cool ideas, a lot of links already about several kind of technologies, for example grids, XOGL, direct frame buffer, and so on. We really try to find as much existing projects as possible. We try to see what's the benefit of it, what's not cool in it, could we use code, or what do we have to write our own. We really want to write the minimum necessary to get to the point we want. If you do have know-how, contribute. Don't start religious discussions in here. This is plain technology review in here. If you want to discuss stuff, use the mailing list. This is actually the first link here. The mailing list name is Voyager-development@netlabs.org. We have a news interface at mail.org. It's not that much stuff in there yet, but you can see what exists already. You can contribute by joining the mailing list, by using the web interface, or by using a newsreader. There are RSS feeds as well. If you want to keep track of what's going on, simply click here. That's one thing. The next thing is the track system I talked about. This is our new system, how to track bugs, how to have an overview about the milestones we want to reach, how to have a web interface for the source code. I did that for Knut, and he really started to like it, I guess, because he's using it really a lot. The first page is a wiki page, so the developer can really do some content here in a really easy to use way. Then I just show you a little bit what we have. We have a timeline. We can see exactly what Knut did each day. This is really cool to stress developers. No, but it's really cool because, for example, if you click on a change set, you directly see what changed. Here he obviously typed some stuff. Is that right? Let me show, for example, we have some diffs on there.
Can you make the font larger, please? Control plus.
Control plus. Oops. No, there was something else.
You hit the function key.
You think so? Better? Yeah. Okay, now you see message is quite cool, commit message. You see which files changed, and if you scroll down,
there is no diff there.
oh shit.
Just go to the bottom and see if there is anything.
Bottom of that?
Just go down and see what just go.
Ah, yeah.
Okay.
You really see some changelog in a really nice way, diffs of source code.
Scroll down, I want to see the green stuff as well.
Here we have some green stuff. That's new stuff, the green stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, those lines here were added, for example. This is really a cool thing for developers, makes life easier, and it's simply fun. As Knut said, it's fun to see what I did. I think that's really a cool thing. I did a SVN repository for Qt3 as well. It's in there as well. We have track as well. Jan van Wijk will commit the TX Windows source code to that system as well. And for sure, all the new projects we will set up will go into Subversion and track as well. Existing projects can be migrated as well. When we reach a point where it makes sense to migrate that, we will do that. Just a few other things you can get there. We have the roadmap. This is really cool. The developer can define some milestones about what he wants to do. You see some kind of progress bar about how much of that is implemented. Knut recently, 2 or 3 days ago, released wse06. So this is reached now. For milestone 7, you have some tickets open. We could check what kind of tickets are defined from milestone 8. You see them here. You can use that for bugs as well. Bugs can be registered like that. It's simply a really cool way to work with source code. Browse source is clear. This is basically the web interface we use to know for some projects for CDS. The benefit is that this stuff is really up to date. It's a version is simply much better and much easier to work with. I don't say easier to use, but easier to work with than CVS. It fixes some really annoying things like you can rename files, you can move files. That was not really possible in CVS, and that's a pain in the ass for developers. So that's one thing. You saw the wiki as well, you saw the mailing list as well. Now just two little things about the sum stuff. Just to tease you, to show that we don't just talk about it, we also work on it. This is the document from Chris Wolgemuth. It's now not on the latest level now. He writes about what he did, how much he implemented already, what is missing, what he won't do, and so on. He gives simply an overview about what he is working on. So you see, we are serious with this idea, we try to push that. This, as he called it, it's some H, some homebrew, new implementation of it. Just as one last remark to that, it's not possible to have binary compatibility to existing some applications at the moment. But as you said, we better re-implement the stuff we like. I talked to some people who still are using Object Desktop. We better re-implement that stuff ourselves the way we like it. Okay, and one last screenshot, and then I'm through it. This is a prototype, not using GTK, but WX Windows. This is the toolkit from Brian Smith. He used that because he didn't have another alternative back then. Actually, this window here is completely written by his new some replacement stuff using WX Windows as toolkit.
Dynamic.
Dynamic Windows, excuse me, yeah, exactly. Dynamic Windows. You notice that there are some things missing you would know from a normal WPS folder. The stuff in the background is the old WPS stuff, but it really proves that it's possible to re-implement something like this on our own. This here is the debug log, and this is also some debug stuff here. Doesn't really tease you, I know, but it proves it starts to work. Yeah, it can be done, exactly. Okay, as I said, that's it. I really hope that we can take those ideas as a kickoff. I really hope that you help me motivating other people, focus on the cool things we like. So in 1-2 years, we can get somewhere with our ideas. Thank you very much. Do we really want to have the discussion here, or do we want to move? Okay, let's move to